Hello everybody, this is Bob from Red Bank Battlefield Park in National Park, New Jersey. I'm a volunteer docent at the park, and today I'd like to just discuss a number of types of canteens that would have been used by American forces and continental troops in the American Revolution. The canteen obviously predates the Revolution, as long as fighting men have been engaged in battle. Most British canteens for the period before and during the American Revolution were made out of tin, or really what is more accurate to say was tinned iron. The tin had to be imported, but for the British that was no problem. The Americans, however, found early in the war that they were not able to access a proper supply of tin. And so they had to find an alternative, the tin being needed for other items that really just couldn't be substituted for, like for instance, tinned iron kettles. What Americans began to do then is turn to a native industry that had been in America for a long time, ever really since the beginning of the colonial period. And that would be the cooper industry. Most American towns and cities had a number of cooperages, or at least had access to them. And what coopers did is they made kind of the go-to container of the period of the American Revolution, a barrel made out of wood. It's a pretty skilled job to be able to make a watertight container out of numerous pieces of wood, but many Americans were already skilled at this, and so it became a natural go-to when the need arose for numbers of canteens early in the American Revolution. Now, you can't really overstate the importance of the canteen to a soldier. Many times, engagements would have been fought particularly in spring and summer weather. And during weather like that, the canteen would absolutely have been the difference between the soldier being able to continue in battle or even survive, and them not being able to. For instance, we know that General Washington in the summer of 1776 issued an order that Continental troops fill their canteens each night while they were fighting up around New York City, in order that they'd be ready to go the next day if there were a surprise attack or whatever. And that's how important he felt that keeping a canteen full of an adequate water supply was for Continental troops. We also know, for instance, that during some battles, for instance, the Battle of Monmouth Courthouse, fought in June of 1778, the temperature on the battlefield is estimated to have reached close to 100 degrees with over 90% humidity. And in those kinds of conditions, a soldier's very survival on the battlefield rested on their ability to have access to an adequate water supply and keep themselves hydrated. The estimate today is that several hundred soldiers on both sides died of sunstroke and dehydration during the Battle of Monmouth because of that very problem. The canteen that I'm holding is, again, a typical American canteen of the American Revolutionary period. The construction shows a skilled cooper's use or assembly. The canteen body itself is made out of pieces of cedar wood. The canteen is then held together, and the numerous pieces of cedar wood that make up the barrel of the canteen are held together by oak strips. And to work wood like this, the wood would have to have been soaked in water for days so that it would become pliable. And then a channel for a cotton strap or a strong cord would have been made by the cooper hammering pieces of leather with brass tacks to these sides of the canteen. Many soldiers carved initials on canteens, but in this case, that apparently is all that the soldier carved. So all we know of whoever used this canteen is that they had the initials SL. So here's a good example of a canteen of the American Revolutionary War period. If the cooper had access to the material, and later in the war when the contracts for American canteens that were ordered by the Continental Congress began to change, another type of construction slight wrinkle on it that was favored was the use of iron strips or iron hoops as opposed to the oak strips that were used to fasten the last canteen. This canteen dates from a bit later, maybe the very late 1800s or 1700s or very early 1800s. But these types of canteens with the carved mouthpiece were also used in the American Revolution. The canteens like that tended to hold between 1.5 or 2 pints. And a third type that we know that was used in the American Revolution would have been a canteen such as this. This type is known as a rondelet or a rumlet, and it appears to be nothing other than a small barrel, which is basically what it is. Now, the construction of this canteen was made up again of cedar. It's a readily available wood that is strong enough for a purpose like this. So 11 strips of cedar, one of them with a carved raised mouthpiece, would have been fashioned by a cooper with ends, and then the whole assembly is fastened by wet down strips of willow wood, which overlap each other to hold the straps in place, and then are tacked by a single iron tack at the end. And a canteen like this then could have been suspended from inside here by a cotton strap or by just pieces of cord. And a canteen like this would have held somewhat less liquid, but still would have ensured, if it was refilled properly, at least a supply of water for the soldier. We know that this particular canteen was in fact carried during the American Revolution. There is a tag that dates from 1876 on the canteen, and it notes how it belonged to a sergeant in the 1st New Jersey Continental Infantry by the name of Joshua Townley. And the tag relates how Sergeant Townley carried this canteen in his service in the American Revolution, and in particular during Sullivan's March in 1779, which was a campaign which featured a detachment of American Continental troops, who were then sent up to northern Pennsylvania, southern New York State under General John Sullivan, and their job was to suppress uprising resistance and attacks by Iroquois Native American groups who were allied with the British against American settlements in that region. So we know that Sergeant Townley carried this canteen during Sullivan's March in 1779. These are 3 types then of canteens used in the American Revolution. There were many other types, and in fact, necessity would sometimes dictate that things that we wouldn't even assume or could be used as canteens would be pressed in the service. For instance, we know that sometimes heavy glass bottles would be used, sometimes even hollowed gourds. But these 3 would be pretty typical of what a Continental soldier would have used on campaign if they were able to acquire them.